What's going on, Felters? Welcome into Around the Felt. Tonight, we are recapping the Seattle Seahawks 2024 regular season, their 2025 offseason thus far, and what we think they should do in the upcoming NFL draft. Joining me tonight is my co-host, as always, Reagan Loescher. Buddy, keep calm, and how you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just the chill hippie on this podcast. We're just chilling. I'm doing good, man. I'm just ready to talk some Seattle Seahawks football. An interesting season for them because, most of the time you win 10 games, you expect to be in the playoffs. So,
yeah,
unfortunate. But I would think, if you ask most Seahawks fans, they're super happy with, their head coaching hire in Macdonald. So, yeah, but I'm ready to get right into it. How about you?
Me as well, Reagan. So you already just started with your spiel. Why don't you finish it off? What grade you give him?
No, I will. I gave him a B because it's hard to give him. They did, exceed my expectations. I thought for sure that they would be, drafting a quarterback next year and have like a, be a bottom 10 team. I thought, where the team was on paper, it was going to be kind of a rebuild. And funny enough, they exceeded expectations. I mean, Geno obviously didn't have the best of seasons, but the defense, stepped up and they just seemed to win games. And they lost some bad games too. I mean, you could point to that Giants loss early on in the season and you're like, hey, you win that game, you're a playoff team potentially. But, it seemed like they couldn't always rise to the occasion against some of the better teams. And, you're looking at a 10-7 team. Now they're starting to go through like a weird rebuild phase where you trade Geno, you trade DK, you let Lockett go. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But overall, B for the season. And I think, they really hit a home run with their head coach.
Yeah, I gave him a B minus, a little more mean than what you gave them, but ultimately it is odd seeing a double-digit win team not make the playoffs. It's not foreign, but it's just rare. And this is a team with playoff aspirations. It was a veteran team, so just the fact they didn't actually sneak their way into the postseason, I dinged them a little bit for that with a B minus. I mean, Geno was fine, but now obviously he's gone. Walker was banged up a lot of the season, not ideal, but a positive that came from that was Charbonnet did show some things. He had some big games where I think you feel confident in that 1-2 punch right now. JSN was awesome in year 2, getting rid of Shane Waldron. Let's go. The Shane Waldron curse was lifted from JSN. Maybe we see Rome Odunze follow a similar path next season because JSN was just ridiculous this year. And I think the way that he broke out kind of gave Seattle some confidence that they could move forward without DK Metcalf at this point, who was also good this year, but now he's gone. Another positive, Leonard Williams had a really good year for a player that, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, I thought he was kind of over the hump, like kind of on the decline, but he had some monster games. And
monster pick 6 against his former team in the Jets.
Yeah, that was pretty sick. So, Leonard Williams, really good year. The defense I thought was solid. They were the 11th scoring defense, 14th total, 11th pass. So a lot of young players in that defense really stepping into big roles. The offense was also pretty solid, but they just really struggled because their offensive line was just a mess. And it's still a mess. It's still their biggest offseason need, in my opinion. But ultimately, a B minus for the Seattle Seahawks. A solid year in terms of win-loss record, but you didn't even get to the dance. So
they ain't dancing. And that really is a tough pill to swallow, winning 10 games and not making the playoffs. But, that just speaks to how top heavy the NFC was because there were a lot of bad teams. And obviously, there was also a team that was a wild card with 14 wins. So, it was a weird year for the NFC. I mean, all indications point to me and that this is going to be a team that's kind of I don't even know because it's like, I think Sam Darnold's better than Geno, so I'm fine with that. But then you trade DK away and you bring in Cooper Kupp. So Cooper Kupp's like a win now move, but it's obviously not nearly as good as DK. But I understand like DK wanted a ton of money, but it's just interesting to me of like what direction they're going. I mean, it definitely helps you're giving Darnold 2 good weapons in JSN and Kupp. Even if Kupp's not what he was, he still is like, to me, a top 30, 40 receiver. They just really need to shore up that offensive line. And also, this is year 4 for Kenneth Walker as well. So, you need to know with him is, he's a guy who, when he's healthy, is great. But the thing is, he doesn't stay healthy. So you need to know, like, is it worth giving this guy a long-term contract, or do we want to roll with Charbonnet and run him into the ground for the next year and then draft someone else? So there's a lot of question marks going into this season for the Seahawks.
Oh, 100%, dude. And, just getting back to it, what are your thoughts in its entirety of trading away Geno Smith? I guess Geno reached out to Mike Macdonald in ownership and the front office and was asking for a new deal. And I think at 35 years old, they were like, okay, like we'll entertain it, but I think it just got a little too expensive for what they wanted to pay for a quarterback of his caliber. Maybe, new regime, right? They didn't initially bring in Geno. Maybe they were
that was
maybe
Pete Carroll.
Yeah, maybe they were like, you know what? We won 10 games last year with him. We didn't even make the playoffs. Like, what really is our ceiling being led by Geno Smith? So when the price tag got up there, they decided to move on, and they traded him and recouped a third-round pick. From a long-term team perspective, like for signing Geno for peanuts and then having him develop into a solid NFL quarterback and then flipping him for a third-round pick, like that's a win all around, right? You had some good, solid years with him. You got a third-round pick to now build this team up. I'm fine with them moving off of Geno Smith, right? Because I think they were just kind of stuck in that mediocre range, and I don't know what their ceiling was with Geno. But now you bring in Darnold.
I guess they didn't hit their ceiling because he didn't really have that good of a year. I mean, he was 21-15 for the touchdown to interception ratio. He had a ton of passing yards, but he was just a turnover machine in the red zone.
Yeah.
His team turned the ball over a lot in the red zone, but he really did not have a good season. His numbers are very misleading. Like you see 4,300 passing yards, they're like, damn, but then you see the 21-15 passing touchdown to interception ratio, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely took a step back from, 23, 22. So, I'm fine with the decision. But now you bring in Sam Darnold. And I know I mentioned this on the Minnesota Vikings pod, but I'm a little concerned about Darnold. You go from playing behind, and I'm rooting for Sam, just putting that out there, right? I like Sam Darnold as a player. But you go from behind one of the best offensive lines in the league with two bookend tackles, with Kevin O'Connell as your play caller, with the best receiver out wide, with Jordan Addison, a wide receiver one in his own right after last season. And now you're going in a situation where you traded DK Metcalf. Fine, you didn't want to pay him 3 years, 150, but you know what? In a year or two, that's going to look like a really good deal for a star wide receiver. Like the way the market's booming right now, like I don't know if I necessarily agree with that option because I think him and JSN complement each other really well. But now you got Darnold, and I like JSN. You bring in Cooper Kupp, like solid, fine. But with that offensive line in front of him, dude, and no Kevin O'Connell, I don't think Darnold's going to have nearly as good of a season in Seattle next year than what he did in Minnesota last year.
Yeah, and I mean that's fair because, ultimately we've only seen 1 year of him being a good quarterback. I mean, I guess you could say he was okay 1 year with the Jets, but the majority of his career he's been a bad quarterback, but also the majority of his career he's had, terrible supporting cast. I mean, I would still say like Seattle, while they're not close to Minnesota, at least the weapons are like semi-close. It's just the offensive line's not nearly as good. But I would think, he learned a lot from O'Connell to take away from it. It's not like he's going back into a situation like he was with the Jets and the Panthers. This is definitely way above. And I think, if the defense continues to improve, like, yeah, Sam Darnold will be good enough to get this team over the hump. I do think he's better than Geno Smith. I mean, if you compare Geno Smith's best year, I mean, he was 30 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. And then last year, I mean, Sam Darnold shattered all that. So I understand why you make the move. I mean, 35-12 with Darnold. So yeah, his best year was better than Geno's best year, and he's 27.
8 years younger. 8 years.
No, but
younger.
not even that. I'm saying like Geno was 32 after his best season. Darnold was 27. So it makes more sense if you're going to pay the money to either guy. You're going to pay the guy that, like you said, 8 years younger, but also did it 5 years earlier into his career. There's a lot more shelf life to have.
100%. That's a great point. And also the way the contract's structured, it's a 3-year deal for like 105, but they can get out after 1 year if they want. Like they're paying them a ton of money up front where they can move on after this year if Darnold really does not play well. And also another thing that kind of makes sense for this Darnold sighting. I mean, one thing to point out is obviously playing in that dome in Minnesota. He didn't really play well when he was the Jets quarterback in the elements. He's going to be playing in the elements in Seattle. But week 16 last year on the Vikings, he went to Seattle and he lit their defense up. He threw for 246 yards, 3 touchdowns with no picks, and it was a come from behind win in the elements. Week 16, right? So maybe the Seattle staff saw what he did to them then. And then when they had the opportunity to bring in Darnold, knowing that they were probably going to be Darnold's number one option, they moved off Geno Smith. Maybe Darnold's performance influenced their decision there a little bit.
I mean, definitely a little bit. I mean, that and just, seeing what he did this year. I mean, he gave him all the reasons to be like, hey, it's time to move off. But, where let's segue into the draft a little bit. Where I think there's a lot of options now with all the moves they've made that they can go here. Did you have any? I know you obviously have a mock draft going. So who did you take in your mock draft for a little teaser for those Seahawks fans?
A little teaser going on here. I went offensive line all the way. When you look at this roster, it's like I'm fine with JSN and Kupp at receiver. I don't think there's a receiver that's worth taking here. But
no, I understand. Yeah, that's fair.
But maybe like a Tet McMillan, if you were to slide, I think would make sense the way his skill set might, work with those guys. But I don't think one of the receivers that are on the board in my scenario are viable for Seattle right here. So I'm attacking offensive line, and I'm going a guy with versatility in Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas. He was an All-American at tackle, but a lot of people think he might shift inside to guard given his arm length. He just doesn't necessarily have the frame to be a tackle, but I think he could succeed at tackle. I know you took Charles Cross high in the first round a couple years ago. You were pretty excited about Abraham Lucas initially, but not sold right now, and you still can fill some holes on the inside of that offensive line. So with Kelvin Banks, you have options. You could play him at tackle, kick someone else inside to guard, or play Banks at guard. I think offensive line has to be the play here, and just the versatility of Banks stood out to me for him to be the pick here.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that at all. And it's something I've been mocking for a lot of teams with these offensive line issues is the guys that are versatile, that you could have the guard tackle flexibility, because it's such a key need. I mean, and I still wouldn't rule out wide receiver either for Seattle. It really depends how the draft board shakes out. But obviously Travis Hunter, you can call him whatever you want, but they may have their choice of whatever wide receiver they want. I mean, I know I've talked about it about other teams in that mid-20 range, but we've seen it time and time again where wide receivers fall and then one gets taken in the beginning of the 20s and it's like, oh, there's the avalanche and it's 4 or 5 in a row taken. So they may be the ones that dictate it. And that happened, I believe, the same year JSN was drafted. They started that avalanche.
Yep.
So, we could see that. I mean, I could still see them going on the defensive side of the ball. They have a lot of options here. I mean, they could even trade back or trade up too. If there's like really a guy they like and starts to slide down in the mid-teens and they're like, hey, let's trade up and get him. But there's definitely a lot of issues on this team still. But, with them signing Cooper Kupp, it's like he's not a long-term answer. So it wouldn't be the worst thing if they can find their future number 2 to pair with JSN.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think wide receivers in play. I think defensive line's also in play. I also think now in my mock draft, neither of these guys are on the board at this pick. But Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, one of the tight ends, I think would make a lot of sense to add because I'm sorry, Noah Fant, I'm good. I know what you are at this point of your career as a player.
Which is crazy because he was drafted in the first round as well.
Yeah, but I think he's certainly replaceable at this point. And I think having a tight end that can help improve that run game, but also be a guy that works over the middle of the field for Sam Darnold could be very beneficial.
Yeah, and there's a chance both are available. I mean, I'm not fully sold that Warren's going to be going in the top 20. I mean, the drafts are so weird every year. And, tight end to me is not, a premium, or it's not like one of those positions where it's like, you need them. Like it's similar to the safety where we see guys slide every year. I mean, Bowers even slid last year, and you see how dynamic and big of an impact he made for the Raiders, but he obviously slid pretty far that nobody thought he was going to land that far. And then sure enough, come draft day, he did. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if Warren or Loveland is sitting there, especially Loveland. I mean, Warren's going to go first, but I wouldn't be shocked. Or maybe that, like I said, they trade up and they're like, we like the spot he's at. Like, let's trade up 5 or 6 picks and go get Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I think it would make sense. And Bowers went 14th overall last year.
Exactly.
And neither of these guys are on the level as Bowers as a prospect. But I would say last year was probably a more top-heavy draft. Like you had a lot more star potential players at the top. A lot, especially quarterbacks.
Well, there were 6 quarterbacks taken,
Yeah, so
and there still was no defensive players taken at that point either, which I don't think we'll ever see that again.
Like, just like I have Loveland going 14, I have Warren going 7. So I think if this was last year's draft, like Brock Bowers would have been a top. Like if he was in this draft, Brock Bowers would be a top 10 pick for sure.
Oh, yeah.
For
Definitely.
Sure. All right, let's get Drock in here for some questions on the Seattle Seahawks.
What up, boys? Just have my other bottle of Saratoga and my banana peel.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, you're glowing, dude. You're glowing.
What, you guys want to explain
Do you
that?
live under a fucking rock, dude? Go on Twitter.
What's Twitter, man?
Yeah, sorry, X. My only question for you guys tonight: why trade DK Metcalf?
I mean, it's a very valid question. Why trade a receiver that's in the prime of his career when you're seeing the wide receiver market boom? On one hand, you could be comfortable with JSN. I know they got Cooper Kupp on a much cheaper deal than they would have gotten DK Metcalf. But as I mentioned earlier, Reagan, the way wide receiver contracts are starting to boom right now, 5 for 150 for DK Metcalf, a player of his caliber, the physical specimen that he is.
I would not have paid him that, no.
I mean, it's a lot of money.
Regime too, bro. You got to remember that it's not the regime that drafted him. And I think, to me at least, JSN is the better wide receiver at this point. So they were probably comfortable being like, "Hey, let's trade DK away and let JSN shine and become that true number one." Like I guess you could say, I don't know who the number one is. Now you know, and they're giving JSN the full chance to go and shine, and why he was regarded as one of the best wide receivers to come out of Ohio State. So I love it for that aspect. Plus, like, if you're Mike Macdonald, like, it's not like you drafted this guy. He's not your guy. You know, he's been a headache since being there. Like, yeah, he's special at times, but you're probably confident with JSN, and you're like, hey, you know, let's go draft another weapon in the draft at 22, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver.
Well, they have pick 18, but yeah, I get your point.
18, sorry.
But I also am slightly concerned if you don't have that big physical presence out wide, is it going to be so open over the middle and underneath for JSN?
So I go get Tet McMillan.
If Tet's available, dude. I have him going 8, so I don't know.
We'll see. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
That wraps up our Seattle Seahawks 2024 season recap and our 2025 offseason outlook. Please make sure to hit the comments, hit the likes. Let us know, Seattle fans, who do you want to take at number 18 in the draft? Are you happy with Sam Darnold over Geno Smith? And Reagan, any last words from you?
No, peace out, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.